No harm shall come to this town, not while I live. Here's your look at the brand new Mcfarlane Toys Spawn, Medieval Spawn. Sir John of York, slaughtered by the orders of his own king, was reborn into the world as one of the first true Hell Knights. Eventually captured by the church and sent to destroy Spawn, he was beheaded. Now he exists as something else, a revenant seeking to atone for his sins. Now then, before this minion of Malbolgia gets all medieval on us, I'd like to first thank the folks over at Mcfarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the brand new Medieval Spawn. We can have a look at this review. Grabbing the tape measure as we always do, let's first figure out how tall the figure stands. Medieval Spawn, in this case, stands about 7.5 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 19 centimeters tall. And only just because we recently had a look at this figure, we're going to slide over Medieval Spawn and bring in the recently then looked at Monolith, because I did want to show you guys the comparisons between the two. Medieval Spawn, I feel, would represent a regular standard Spawn-sized figure, where, of course, Monolith being a mega-sized figure, Medieval Spawn goes to about the shoulders of Monolith, while maybe not coming included with a trading card. And I was reminded that generally the Spawn figures tend not to come included with trading cards. He still manages to get himself a display stand. The display stand is still the same shape. It is still the same color as your regular DC Multiverse stands. I just happen to have one off to the side here. I'm not even sure which figure this came included with. But you can see that like the colors does vary from time to time when it comes to plastic that they mold these stands in. This one just happens to be a little bit lighter. What's done, though, differently is also down below you've got the Spawn logo printed, whereas, again, this one has just had the DC logo. Other than that, though, they are exactly the same stands to one another. You can move that to the side. The figure comes included with some pretty devastating weapons. I can only imagine the damage that these would inflict. First of all, you get yourself a war hammer. Look at the size of this thing. What I do like is on the very end of it, you can see that the head of the hammer or mallet, would you consider it a mallet? I would say it's a hammer. It does have at least the front face of, well, Spawn's logo there. So it does leave an impression, literally and figuratively. I do like the fact that there's spikes onto the top. Like, not getting hit by the flat head wasn't bad enough to get that impaled or spiked with the end spike of it. You can imagine how devastating that would be. And just look at the size of this one point, if you get the point. It's nicely molded here, all in a metallic gunmetal gray, and that's a neat looking hammer. It does fit into his hands. We're going to get to doing that in a second. The figure also comes included with a very broad sword. The sword itself, if you would look at the two, they're molded in the exact same coloring and plastic. It does have some additional scripture that's been carved into the actual blade of the broadsword. And not only is the guard and the hilt sculpted well, but I just really like the shape of this particular sword. Again, can fit into his hands. Because he does have at least gripping hands on both sides, it means he has the available means to store both his weapons at the exact same time. It's entirely up to you which way you'd like to do this. For example, if you want to take the sword then fits into his hand. I'm sure somebody will ask the question, can you actually have him holding both the sword with, well, both the sword with both hands, I should say. You can, it's just very difficult, and he doesn't do the greatest jobs of holding it. Rather, instead, I think I would much rather just display the figure with sword then in one hand and his big wielding war hammer in the other. It just can pry the plastic away and get the hammer in there. Boy, is he ready for battle. That does look really good. There is really no storage space to actually take the weapons and put them on the figure if you don't plan to put them into his grip. One workaround, I suppose, you can take yourself, for example, the sword and sheath it in between sort of the chains that he has making up the belt of his body. So you can kind of store it there as a place to store it, obviously, if you're not looking to put it in the figure's hands. And maybe I might just end up doing that and then keep the warhammer at least in one of his hands for right now. Again, you can kind of put the hands together, at least the warhammer, because he has a longer handle to it. It does actually have the means to probably hold it in both his hands, so you have that option also available. Let's just take for right now at least these accessories. We're going to put them to the side, unsheath the partially sheathed sword. We're going to put that also to the side and get a closer look then at Medieval Spawn. Boy, this does bring back memories. I may have had, I think, as the first Spawn figure I ever bought, a long time ago, of course, was Medieval Spawn. Medieval Spawn, I sort of wish I still had that figure. Would have long since parted ways with it. And obviously, they have made some considerable improvements over the years, not only with the sculpting, but the additional articulation that the original figures would not have possessed. Yeah, I think it was a medieval Spawn. May have been my very first Mcfarlane toy Spawn figure, even before I ended up getting myself a Spawn. It was him, and then eventually I got myself the more basic Violator. Man, I still wish I had those figures in my collection. But this is a nice updated look to, of course, medieval Spawn. He's got instead of the regular traditional mask, while it still has a lot of the same calling cards that a Spawn would normally have, what he has instead is a helmet. You can see the way they've sculpted the helmet does have, again, like little riveted points there, so it does look like actually armored helmet, as opposed to something you would have wore as a mask. I like the way it sticks out to the back there as well, to really resonate the idea that this is a helmet rather than instead a mask. The top of the mask, or the top of the helmet, is actually more of a softer plastic, so there's that. Obviously, that's not going to be breaking or anything like that. But overall, it's just a great looking figure. It has a lot of stuff to really hone in on with your eyes. There's a lot of things to kind of really take in. And while the sculpting, I think, is really good on this figure, where I feel it may perhaps lack quite a bit is in the additional paint. All the parts that I really do like, for example, like the red there on the front, and of course you got the little outline, the kind of M outlining that Spawn would normally have had, that's well painted. Not to mention as well the way they've actually painted the shoulders. I suppose there could have been a chance to go in there with a brush of paint and, just a clear coat or a very thin coat of black paint, just to help bring some of those details out. But it still is something to take in. You've got the nice cool skull there on the other side of the shoulder pad. This one's actually a little bit larger than this one, but this one does have additional spikes, but the spikes are a little more of a softer plastic. Where I really feel the paint does unfortunately under-deliver is all the parts that are silver plastic. His gauntlets, for example, his chain, or more importantly, the skull that he has on the front for the belt buckle, which is actually a softer plastic also as well. I was kind of surprised to see that this was a softer plastic and not a harder plastic. But I think the real thing that misses the most when it comes to this figure is that when you get down to the legs, the lower calf areas, of course, he's got the larger boot on the one side. He's got then the smaller calf guard on the other. And he has it looks like something almost that Triple H would have had at some point wearing as a mask. It looks really good, and it's sculpted extremely well. But it feels like it almost misses a mark a little bit by not having some additional paint washed over top of it. There's just so much good sculpting happening here on the figure that I feel with just a little clear coat, just a little bit of a black wash to this would really help to bring a lot of those details out. I'm sure it's something that adding customizer or myself may be trying to do myself. I might even just take, I don't know whether I want to even try it. I might try to take a little bit of like a watered down black paint. See if I can put it over top of some of these areas, because I really think there's a lot of opportunity that's missed here by only sculpting it just in the silver plastic alone. Of course, we kind of just quickly went down to the parts that I think are kind of missing a little bit, but there's so much stuff that's going right with this figure. For example, he does have, again, we've already talked about the fact he does have this very large skull belt buckle, and he also has, again, the chains that sort of drape down here to the front, but he's also got, of course, the chains that wrap around to the back of the figure's body. There's a lot of cool stuff going on here with the skirting that he has as well. It's more of a copper plastic, but it's so well sculpted. And even though this doesn't have, again, anything added to it when it comes to paint, there is so much stuff to really take in when it comes to sculpting of it that I think I'm okay with the fact that this doesn't have it as much here. I just still wish it was a lot more down below here, especially in the legs. The legs is, I think, the part, and maybe, again, like the gauntlets, are probably the parts that I really wish could have used a lot more paint than what we actually get here. One thing I also really like about the figure is the way they've sculpted the cape. It's pretty close to his body. It doesn't fan out too far, and it has like a natural drape to it the way that cape normally would be. But a small touch of detail I really like is the fact that the top of it is attached to his body by tiny little skulls. Do you see that? Let me just actually peel away. There you go. You guys can really see. There's tiny little skulls that are actually bolting this to the back of the figure's body. It's such a great looking figure to kind of take all in. And again, with getting a figure like this on your shelf, you're going to probably be picking him up periodically, moving him around, but just again, like admiring all the work that Mcfarlane's team put into this figure. While yes, it is lacking a lot in the way of the paint, because again, I really feel the paint is the thing that really would have sold this so much nicer. It's still a really nice sculpted figure overall. For the articulation on medieval Spawn, we're going to go back to his head sculpt here. It's on a ball joint, so it does rotate all the way around. You can have the figure's head, for example, looking up. You can have it looking down, quite a lot more, in fact, than you can have it looking up. But you can also rock it back and forth as well. The figure's shoulders, being the fact that the shoulder pads are actually attached here rather than actually attached to the torso, means that you can very easily rotate the arms all the way around.
And that's the case also on this side as well. You can bring the arms out, and this is the only part that's a little bit more limited. About 45 is about all you're really going to be getting here from Medieval, but you can at least rotate his bicep. You have double hinge on the elbows for the figure, and you have the hand rotations all the way around. It's a little hard at points because obviously it's going to be having to get around the gauntlet. And while it normally would allow you to rotate all the way around, you are going to be hitting a few little hiccups along the way. Upper torso is on a ball joint. Lower down from that, the figure does have an abdomen ball joint, so you can rotate around that way as well. Legs do split out, and because again, like the skirting not only is softer plastic, but they also allowed for a little bit of allowance, so you can really split the legs a lot further than what I expected initially. You can take the legs and move forward, you can take the legs and move them back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh. Figure does also possess a double hinge on the knee. It's a little harder, in fact, to actually get the double hinge because the kneecap is covering over. Well, you've got this part of the kneecap covering over it, but you can see there's a peg joint right there, and there's a peg joint right there. So for all intents and purposes, the figure does have a double hinge on the knee. Then he does have, again, the additional articulation for the ankle. You can rock it back and forth, and the figure does also have toe articulation as well. Where I feel the figure does not miss its mark, but meet its mark is the fact that it's sculpted so nicely. Man, I really wish I still had the original Medieval Spawn I had from so long ago. I would have loved to have had the chance to bring him out and then have him displayed along with the new updated version we get here from Mcfarlane's team. This by far is easily one of my favorite of the recent Spawn figures that we've gotten. It's got a lot of detail going for it. Yes, while it does miss a lot when it comes to paint, I feel, again, the paint missing here on the gauntlets and missing down below more so in the legs is the part where the figure does come up a little bit short. But from a sculpt standpoint, from an articulation standpoint, and the weapons that he wields, Medieval Spawn is a fun figure to pick up if you get the chance to find one. Because I only really talked about it in the review and didn't actually get down to showing you guys, he does have, again, the means to hold the hammer with both his hands, and you can actually draw back the hammer like he's willing to drop the hammer with a devastating swing. Which, of course, leaves then behind one question of what you can then do with the sword. Well, again, as I did talk about in this review, he does have at least enough allowance with the chain belt that he has on the side of his body that you can sheath the sword as a temporary fix so that you don't have to put away the sword with the rest of your bag of accessories. Nice overall looking figure. Job well done. Maybe I'll just applaud Mcfarlane's team here in the background here. Job well done for a fine looking Medieval Spawn. Yes, admittingly, he is still lacking a lot of the paint, especially you notice it the most when it comes to the silver plastic. It's not as bothering for me, at least when it comes to his shoulders. Certainly isn't bothering for me when it comes to the skirting that he has. That copper color works extremely well for the figure, but the thing that stands out, I think, more like the sore thumb is that any time they get the chance to use this silver plastic, the lighter silver plastic, does look like, honestly, like it really needed a coat of paint, just a wash, a clear wash, or like a diluted black paint. That's sometimes what a lot of customizers end up doing. They just dilute black paint, they brush it across the surface of the plastic, they wipe away the residual, and that what usually then leaves behind is sort of the filled in areas, the creases, the crevices. All those parts are still left behind with the paint, and then you get a really nice contrasting of colors. This figure, while it doesn't have the contrast, I think it does give you at least a blueprint, a palette to work with if you are a customizer that likes to go in and customize your figures. Not that the figure really should have to have anything customized to it when you immediately get out of the packaging, but I think to take already the mold and run with it, I think adding a little bit of paint, so certainly would let a lot of the details that they sculpted in this figure in the first place really get the chance to shine. What do you guys think of Medieval Spawn? Let me know down below in the comment section. Could you guys see yourselves picking up this figure and adding it to your collection? Weigh in your thoughts, what you think of the figure down below in the comment section. And once again, a big thank you to the folks over at Mcfarlane's Toys that did provide the sample of the brand new Spawn Medieval Spawn we got the chance to have a look at in this review. If you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. But if you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly on board to see more, then make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and that you're also turning on the bell notification. If you also have a little bit of time on your hands and would like to stick around for more, then make sure you also click the playlist. It will be popping up at the very end of this video. It will cover everything I've ever looked at for Spawn. So again, if you are a big fan of Spawn and maybe haven't had the chance to see all the other reviews that I've done for the line, check out that playlist. Like I said, it'll be popping up at the very end of this video. We're going to have a lot more videos, by the way, coming your way. A lot more Spawn videos coming your way, FYI. So make sure you're coming back to this channel with peepers peeled all the time. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.